Happy Friday, Dog Nation. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. A little bit of a late start today. That is on me, but it's going to be an incredibly fun show. A lot of this recruiting-related. Jeff Sentel stopping by later on. We'll go on the road, assisted by AAA with him today. We'll get an update on this long list of recent visitors to UGA, plus a little bit of a preview of who's still on the way. Month of June, we knew it would be busy. It has been as advertised thus far. Also on today's show, an interesting look behind the scenes, if you will, at some of the recruiting pitch that guys get when they come on campus at Georgia. I think you're going to like this. We'll do it off the very top of the show here today. We'll have a great time with that, and glad to have you with us. Get your weekend started early as DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
To be honest with you, I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with technology. A lot of you know that. Some of the people who work with me very closely certainly know that best of all. Sometimes technologists are not quite always my friend, but there is one way in which I think that technology has undeniably improved my life, and I think you would probably say the same thing if you really stop to consider it. For those of us who care about high school football players who were going to become college football players, the recruiting world. If you care about the recruiting world, there is no doubt technology has benefited recruiting almost as much as it's benefited really anything, certainly connected to the media. I mean, think about this, and some of you are old enough to remember back when you would have to call like a 1-900 number to find out who was going to go where, or you had some sort of newsletter mailed to your house, or something along those lines. That's obviously kind of the dark ages compared to what we have now. Not only is there kind of this instantaneous recruiting update when guys are taking visits, whatever else, we actually have kind of a long history of that. And so there's just a lot of information we have available to us now in terms of what's happening in the world of college football recruiting that generations ago you just would not have been able to imagine having there at your fingertips. And some of this comes by the reporters who work in this industry, like our own Jeff Sentel, who'll join us a little bit later on. And sometimes it kind of comes to us via other means. I'm very thankful that recruits themselves are good enough to tweet out or share on Instagram aspects of their recruiting process, whether it be their thoughts from time to time. Sometimes they'll give us behind-the-scenes photos. I remember some of the first recruits a couple of weeks ago to kind of come through the Georgia brand new football facility that opened up. They shared some video with us of that, and it was really kind of a really cool behind-the-scenes look at what they were seeing, because for a lot of us, even though we have all of this information at our fingertips now, there is still an insatiable appetite to know more about what's going on. Hey, these recruiting visits that have been overtaking the Georgia campus over the course of the month of June. What really happens when those guys are on campus there? And technology gives us a way of knowing more about that now than we would have ever known before. Let me give you another example of this here recently, and if you're a Georgia fan, I believe you're going to really, really like this. One of the great players to come through the Georgia program in recent years is the former linebacker, Renny Curran. Renny's been a many-time guest of ours here on DawgNation Daily. Just a really sharp guy, very good player. In fact, he, I think now, mostly for a career and a job, kind of spends his time traveling around and speaking to businesses or other people. He's kind of a motivational speaker, kind of a sharp, business-minded guy. He's really good at that kind of thing. And apparently, Georgia brought Curran in to speak to some recent recruits, both in terms of, hey, I played at Georgia, here's the feeling about being here, but also as kind of a way of making it a value add for the recruits themselves of, hey, making sure you have the best thought process mindset as you approach this chapter of your life. So it's more than just a pitch for Georgia. It's also a message to the recruits about being the absolute best you can be. I think it's kind of a cool thing. And so for those of us who've been kind of left to wonder, well, what really happens when these recruits are on campus? Renny Curran shared this video on YouTube of him speaking to the recruits, and it gives you kind of a pretty good idea of a little bit of what these guys go through. So that's kind of a cool part of this. But then there's also this. And this is where, I've told you before, this kind of stuff really works on me. Obviously, I love the idea of guys who played at Georgia being happy about their experience and using that time on that podium, that microphone, almost be a little bit of an evangelist for the Georgia program to say, if you follow in my footsteps, you will have, I predict, a similar experience to what I had. The happiness that I have about having played at Georgia, my guess is if you do the same thing, you'll feel the same way. So it's a Friday. We're all in kind of a good mood. At least I hope you're in a good mood as you get ready ready to go into the start of a weekend. And there's nothing that I would think that would put Georgia fans in a better mood than to hear a great former player like Renny Curran speaking to a potential next generation of great players at Georgia. Renny shared this on YouTube. Here is him speaking to recruits about what they ought to know about what will happen if they come to the University of Georgia. This is very strong stuff from Renny. Take a listen to this.
It was so much work, so much sacrifice, but it was worth it. It's been said so many times, but this is family. This is family, and when you put that jersey on, man, it's like you don't realize how many guys have come before you. But it's special. How many guys have sacrificed? How many guys have bled, have sweat, have put in time, effort? How many people have donated? People who care so much about this. Other young kids who watch you and then years later, they're like, man, I remember. I mean, I meet fans, guys. To this day, I ain't played at UGA since 2009. And I got to give a shout out to Coach Harley, Coach Jancy, my two coaches who were here when I was here, but I haven't played here since 2009, and I still get people coming up to me, whether it's on a plane, whether it's at a speaking engagement, whether it's at school, no matter where I'm at, they're like, Renny, thank you for what you did. I can't imagine another place where it would be like that. Like, it's not just football, guys. Like, this is low-key a religion. Like, it's that deep.
I don't know if you can tell, but there's like this, like, underneath Renny speaking, there's like this motivational type music. It almost sounds like something from like Friday Night Lights or something like that, which I think is a really nice touch. And I love what Curran says there. He talks about when you put that Georgia uniform on, not only do you feel like you're a part of a family, and I'm glad to know that he feels that way, but you also feel a part of something. What was it he said? Something to the effect of all the guys who've come before you that have put that uniform on. And that's always, to me, kind of an awesome thing to consider. I have a lot of friends who are high school coaches, and I've been in locker rooms with some of them when they've spoken to their players. And one coach in particular that I know, one of the things he would say from time to time is, when it comes to the program that you're playing for, this program existed before any of us got here, in many cases before any of us were born, and it will exist a long time after all of us are gone there as well. That there is something about the team that you play for, the program that you're part of, that predates you and will exist long after all of us have kind of stepped off this mortal coil. That's the kind of power that comes from being a part of something that truly is bigger than you, Georgia football. I think that Curran describes that incredibly well there. And then he goes into this, and there's a phrase that a lot of you are familiar with, the idea of being a DGD. We throw that around on this show a lot. Georgia fans talk about DGDs a lot. Damn good dog is what it stands for. And I love the way that Renny Curran describes for someone, and listen, no one can deny, especially for those of you that can remember Renny as a player and kind of experienced him a little bit in his post-playing career life. No one can deny that Curran probably embodies DGD status as well as anybody could, and he describes here for a moment what it feels like to kind of live that way, and what, from the perspective of someone who's kind of in that category, who's in that exclusive club, what it truly feels like to be a DGD. Here's a little bit more from Renny Curran, strong stuff.
I was just in Jekyll Island 2 days ago speaking to the superintendent's group, Georgia Bulldog fans. I'm going to Dallas on Monday to speak to a medical company. CEOs of Georgia Bulldog owner, alumni. That's how special it is. So it's not just, you're not just making a commitment for now. This is a lifetime commitment. And it goes on and on and on. And I will tell you guys, for those of y'all who are committed and those who are thinking about committing, if you come here and you work hard and you get labeled as what they call a DGD, which is a damn good dog, you are good. You are good for life. It don't matter where you go, anywhere, not just in this state. Dallas, New York, California, wherever you go, you will be respected. And most of all, you will have the opportunity to make an impact.
So I'm telling you right now, Renny Curran could give the altar call right there. He just have all kinds of guys. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to commit right there on the spot, and I hope that it had the same impact on some of those Georgia recruits there as well. Just kind of a cool thing to hear, kind of a cool thing to share. And let me also just say this really quick as a quick aside. One of the things that comes up on shows like this in this kind of age in which we live, or discussions about name, image, likeness, and potentially one day maybe a full-on pay-for-play. And I totally respect that there are different people that feel different ways about that kind of stuff. There are some people, including players themselves, who heartily embrace the emergence of the name, image, likeness era, or maybe even one day more of a true full-on pay-for-play era. They think it's time for that to happen. They think it's long overdue to happen. As you know, at least if you listen and watch the show closely, that's not necessarily my feeling, but I respect those who do feel that way. Here's the one thing I would ask you to consider, though, on the basis of what Renny Curran just said there, that even in a world where you have name, image, likeness revenue going to the hands of the players, or something one day even bigger and beyond that, what you're still talking about with all that kind of stuff is a transaction, right? And a transaction is fine, but I would suggest that there is something for the players out there that's actually better than a transaction. I would say it's a relationship. I think relationships are better than transactions. And what Curran describes there is a true full-on relationship. And if you're a player looking to cash in on your connection to college athletics, the best way to still make money off your experience as a college athlete, especially a college football player, is through the kinds of relationships that Renny Curran's describing there, more so than just a transaction. A transaction is kind of a debt paid in full, and once the debt is paid, both parties go their own way, and that's kind of an end of the relationship. But a true full-on relationship is the kind of thing that leads to a mutual indebtedness that can last forever. And as Renny Curran says, that he truly believes for him it's going to last forever there as well. So at least consider that, the words of Renny Curran right there, as you think about the new age that college football is beginning to enter into. But beyond that, take a moment as a Georgia fan to appreciate the fact that a guy that played at Georgia, played at an incredibly high level, has very good feelings about his time at UGA, and now spends some of that time telling recruits just how true he believes that to be. That's a great way to start Friday. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Kroger, and we're glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, radio. We're going to be back on the radio. I'm really excited about this. We're going to be back on the radio again Monday with our friends on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. So happy to be back in the Classic City again. Looking forward to doing that Monday. It's going to be a lot of fun. Of course, podcast-wise, the Apple Player, the Google Player, Spotify, worldfamousdogNation.com. A lot of ways for you to catch up with the podcast. We really appreciate you doing that with us all summer long there. Big thanks to our friends at Kroger for making it all possible here today. Kroger always doing great things for the community, including right now, still keeping those COVID vaccines in mind. Many of you need to do that. Well, you can do that right now, or at the little pharmacy, the little clinic between now and July 10th. You can enter for a chance to win one of 5 $1 million checks or groceries for a year. How about an incredible giveaway like that? Really cool thing. So you can get your COVID vaccine at the Kroger pharmacy or the little clinic through July 10th. And as I said before, one of 5 $1 million checks or a chance to win groceries for a year. Really, really incredible thing there. Check out this website, KrogerGiveaway.com. KrogerGiveaway.com. You can enter for your chance to win. You can see all the official rules. It's KrogerGiveaway.com for a lot more on that. All right, before I do Around the Doghouse and tell you about everything else that's going to be happening on the program here today, let me say this here really quickly. So one of the things I get asked about, probably more than anything else right now, is BA. Is there going to be a DawgNation invasion this year to Charlotte for the first game against Clemson? And I've kind of had to be somewhat, I guess, vague about this because, look, there's always like chains of command and, things have to be signed off on, and I'm always told not to say, whatever, because, you have to cross I's, or I should say dot I's, cross T's, things like that. So here's what I can tell you. That the answer to the question is obviously leaning in the direction of yes. So on Wednesday, be with me next week. I think the day for this is Wednesday. On Wednesday, we are going to announce all the details of DawgNation invasion for Charlotte for the season opening game against Clemson. Now, here's one of the things I'm really excited about. One of the reasons why we haven't been able to say more about this up until now is because the people behind the scenes, and these are in some cases people you'll never meet or you don't know their names or anything like that, but they have been working to make it as big as possible. It's one of those things that kind of starts here, kind of somewhat small, but as you start, brainstorming and planning, it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I truly believe, on the basis of the conversations I've already have a chance to be a part of, that this has a really, really strong chance to be the best DawgNation invasion we've ever done. It's going to, I think, accommodate a lot of different people who have somewhat different needs related to all this for Charlotte for the season opener. And let's face it, it's also the first time in a long time that a lot of us get to get back together for a big, big football game after most folks last year were kind of excluded from that process. So stick with me on Wednesday. I've got more details for you. DawgNation Invasion, y'all. This is going to be such a good time. I wish I could tell you today, but there's still just a little bit more that has to be done. But on Wednesday, I can give you the full details of all of this. And here's the problem. Even if you make it big, it's still limited space. So part of the reason why I'm giving you a little bit of a warning now about Wednesday is you got to be ready to jump in quick. And this is not like hype, although I am a hype man by trade. This is not just hype here. Once we open this thing up, it's going to start going, and the world's not infinite, so we can only have, a limited number of space available. So stick with me on Wednesday for more on that. This is going to be really fun. DawgNation Invasion, more details to come next week. Really looking forward to that. All right, we're going to Jeff Sentel here in a moment. We'll go on the road to Stitched by AAA with him. But before that, though, let's go around the doghouse here for a moment. And one of the things that we're going to speak to Jeff Sentel about in just a moment is an interview that he did this past week on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger, with four-star wide receiver Kojo Antwi. Antwi's got a decision coming up in July. I think Antwi is one of the more interesting recruits in the 2022 class because there's a lot of competition for his services. Obviously, Georgia looks at wide receiver as a position of need here for the 2022 class. And in some cases, Antwi probably plays his cards a little closer to the vest than some of the other guys who are uncommitted prospects right now. There are a lot of uncommitted guys who are not afraid to profess how much they really like Georgia, and some have even outright called Georgia their leader. Antwi doesn't quite do that. However, when he did meet with Jeff Sentel on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger this past week, he did talk a little bit about what, in comparison to all the other schools, and he said something nice about each of them, but I'm only going to play the clip here about Georgia, of kind of what he views as the biggest, I guess, advantage for UGA in his recruitment right now. This is Kojo Antwi.
Biggest plus for Georgia? Home state. I think biggest plus is Coach Hankton, and, him being real with me, and him being, a genuine guy, and wanting to develop me into, the best where I can be.
So I think that's really good from Kojo Antwi, saying some nice things about Cortez Hankton, and also the entire interview, and it's worth either watching at DawgNation.com or the DawgNation YouTube page. The story with Kojo from this past week at DawgNation.com gives you some good insight there on that too. He shares his thoughts about a number of those schools, but it's nice to hear him shouting out Cortez Hankton and nice to hear him saying what he wants to see more of from his recruitment. I also think this is kind of cool. We like it when recruits recruit other recruits. Georgia's got a few of those in this class. Jalen Walker, we mentioned the other day, who are out there working hard. Another one of those guys who's just burning the candle at both ends on social media all the time is the four-star wide receiver commit to Nyland Morissette. And Morissette had a funny thing for Antwi on Twitter the other day, sharing a picture of the two of them together. I think we have this that we can show here. Yeah, this is Morissette sharing a picture with Kojo Antwi. It's both of them side by side with the very cool backdrop of Sanford Stadium with the lights off and the red lights glowing. Morissette tells Antwi, he says, this could be us, both wearing the Georgia uniform, but you're playing, Morissette says there. So really funny stuff. Kojo Antwi keeping his cards close to the vest, but it's nice to see a guy like Nyland Morissette out there really recruiting hard for Georgia on social media. That's a really fun thing, and that is Around the Doghouse. Before we get Jeff Sentel, let me also say this. Make sure you check out my friends at the Finish Long Drink as you head towards the weekend. So many folks have been reaching out to me this spring and summer to say, BA, you've been telling us about Finish Long Drink, and yeah, you know what? I love the flavor. I love the great taste. I love the strong liquor kick that goes with this, with the kind of the citrus flavors that sometimes go. That's really my favorite one. The one that kind of has the grapefruit. It's the one that comes in the blue can that has the grapefruit with the gin kick. It's just it's ready to drink right out of the can. There's no mixing. There's no hard work. Just pop the top and enjoy it. Some of you like the cranberry Danbury. I know a lot of the students in Athens there at UGA. Some of the bars around Athens, they've really enjoyed that. Some of you like the long drink strong, and I understand where that's coming from. That's 8.5% alcohol by volume. There's also long drink zero. This is the kind of thing that's been really, really popular in Finland going back to the 1950s. The summer games were in Helsinki back then, and the drink was kind of created as a way of celebrating that. And then its popularity grew over the decades. Now it's in the United States, and now it's here in the state of Georgia there as well. So whether it's a beverage store or a bar or whatever else, golf clubs in a lot of ways. There are a lot of golf courses around my area that have this there as well. You just want to find out where it is. So if you go to the website, thelongdrink.com, you can find that out for yourself. Thelongdrink.com, and you can do what I've been doing this summer, what a lot of other folks have been doing there as well, which is enjoying yourself some Finnish long drink. All right, speaking of enjoying yourself, hope you enjoy yourself here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger here today. I know you're going to like what we're going to do next. A lot of recruiting information. Let's get it from our guy, Jeff Sentel, who has been embedded so deeply with so many recruits here over the course of the last few weeks. So good chance to get some insight with him as we go on the road with Jeff Sentel, assisted by AAA.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
On the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sentel here today. Good to have a chance to talk to Jeff Sentel live. I guess the last two times we've spoken to Jeff on this show, because of a vacation for him at one point, vacation for me last week, these discussions have been pre-recorded. This, in the moment, reacting to everything that's been going on, and obviously a great chance to be able to do that. Jeff, happy Friday to you. Thanks for being here on the road, assisted by AAA, and I hope you're doing well here today.
Hey, Brandon. Hey, man. Good morning. I hope everybody's doing well. And, man, I think since we had those pre-tapes, man, I think the soap operas have shifted in a lot of directions for a lot of players, and that's why we got to keep up with this stuff every day.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I was talking about Kojo Antwi a little bit before you joined us, and I don't know if you would join me in saying this, but Antwi, I think, is among the more interesting recruits of the class of 2022, because in comparison to a guy like, say, Branson Robinson, we'll get into Robinson before we're done here today, but Robinson, who has openly professed Georgia to be his leader, and I'm not saying that's a done deal or anything like that, but he has not shied away from saying nice things about UGA. There are other recruits who kind of do similar things where they don't seem to be all that interested in playing their cards that close to the vest. Now, sometimes it's kind of a little bit of a what do you want to call it, like a trick or kind of, just having some fun. Kamari Wilson maybe an example of that, because at different times he seems to show love, for different schools, whatever else. But in the case of Antwi, he doesn't really do any of that. He just seems to be fairly buttoned up about his process. I thought you did have a good interview with him this week on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger, and obviously a lot of folks also read some of those quotes there at DawgNation.com. But when you speak one-on-one with Antwi, do you get much in the way of insight about where he might be leaning? Because he certainly does a pretty good job of kind of giving equal weight to all the schools that he's mentioned or asked about.
Well, that's a good place to start, Brandon, because I think weight is a good way to describe it. Now, like we put this on the DawgNation forum yesterday, we saw what it certainly looked like to me Kojo Antwi was at least doing on his Instagram story. He was at least doing some principal photography for his commitment video, and from a guy that's had some experience in those waters. It's really smart with a July 5th announcement to be getting a lot of that, a couple of those shoots, a lot of those things already done and in the can. On our interview, Brandon, it took a lot of experience to sit there and, okay, was Kojo just tired because he was running at cornerback and he was running at wide receiver all day at Lassiter High School for the Lutzy 43 Foundation event, or whether he just had the weight of the world on his shoulders. And for me, it kind of looked like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. This is going to be a very hard decision. He even told me, Brandon, he's down to 2 schools out of those 4. He's eliminated Alabama. It's just 4. And I think the hard part for a lot of our viewership and a lot of our readership was we're trying to figure out, which 2 of those 4 are they actually. And that's a really tough thing, because he said very impactful, very strong statements about USC and Ohio State. I think Georgia is smack dab in the middle of this thing as well. And then there's the family connections with Texas A&M. So that was coming soon, Brandon, July the 5th. And I think it will definitely be a waypoint kind of like if you look at Georgia recruiting like the Oregon Trail, where you've got to decide if you want to float the river or you want to hire the tour guide. That's definitely going to be a part in the journey where you've got to sit there and go, Georgia's recruiting class will change dramatically based on Coach Antwi's decision.
Well, speaking of the Oregon Trail, I just hope it doesn't leave us dead by dysentery, because that was also an issue you'd occasionally run into with Oregon Trail over the years. So just a real quick follow-up to this, because that did jump out to me, the idea that he is kind of his four, thinking about two more so than the rest. And certainly if you're a Georgia fan, you hope Georgia's one of those. At one point in time, we did hear more Ohio State with him, and he said some very nice things about Ohio State, both with Brian Hartline, the coach, and the other players in the room. It's obviously a very deep wide receiver room. He said some nice things about Ohio State in the interview that you did with him. If we assume that Georgia is one of those two, do you think the second of those two is more likely Ohio State or more likely Texas A&M, the school that he has kind of a familiar connection to because at least one of his siblings lives in the state of Texas?
Yeah, I think what happened here is Ohio State went from maybe 3 or 4 to probably 2 or 3. I think that's the safest conclusion I can draw. And it's funny, Brandon, and you want to talk about young men and short attention span theater or whatever, but he mentioned that Ohio State is about to have 2 guys go in the first round. That would be Garrett Wilson and Olave, and then another 2 guys go in the first round the year after that. You know, Brendan, look how quickly a narrative can change, because one of the things that when you really look at Ohio State and its wide receiver recruiting, they haven't had first-round wide receivers, although they have the reputation that they're a pipeline. They've just now been doing mega recruiting over the last 3 or 4 cycles and getting a lot of big-time receivers, but everyone thinks that they have Alabama's reputation and pipeline effect at the wide receiver position. It's not happened yet, but a lot of these recruits look at Ohio State and see the prolific numbers on offense, the quarterbacks that are in the Heisman conversation, and they think that Ohio State is producing first-round receivers, and that's not happened yet.
So the other day on the show, we showed some photographic evidence of 5-star Oklahoma wide receiver commit Luther Burden spending some time at Georgia. My understanding is that was a multi-day visit. This is the kind of thing that, I'm not really quite so sure how seriously to take this. I said on the show, it's just kind of nice to see Georgia hosting big-time guys like this because it creates a certain level of energy for the program. I mean, how serious would you take Georgia right now for a guy like Burden? These are the kinds of receivers that in recent years haven't always given Georgia much of a serious thought. Some of those guys, in fact, are even at Ohio State right now, who you could say that about. So is this a tourist visit for Burden? Is this a real visit where Georgia has a chance to make an impression? What do you think of a 5-star Oklahoma commit being at Georgia the last couple of, or at least a couple of days this week?
Yeah, so Brendan, I can hear a producer in my ear screaming that you should speak Luther Burden into existence.
I like it.
And drop that Harry Potter magic wand action on. I know they're very, very catalyst recruit potentially for Georgia. Brendan, I'll be honest. I think this is a point now where it would be news if a 5-star didn't visit Georgia this month, especially at a position of dire need. Luther Burden, he's out of St. Louis. And you hear a lot of rumblings that he's flippable or he's looking with wayward eyes away from Oklahoma. And a lot of, you hear Missouri, home state Missouri, nearby Missouri might be one of the schools in the mix. And I think Georgia's case, Georgia got a pretty solid, strong first date with Luther Burden. And I think now the burden on Georgia, so to speak, is to put up prolific passing numbers, wide open offense in the fall. When that happens, the ingredients for getting Luther Burden on campus again is looking very good against Clemson, putting up big passing displays during September, and then you can draw him in for an October official visit. And then that, I think, is when I would say Georgia's really in the thick of that thing then for Luther Burden.
It's on the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sentel. By the way, speaking of AAA, I'm actually going to be on the road a little bit this weekend, traveling a little bit. When I do, I'm always thankful for that roadside assistance that AAA is so famous for. But my encouragement to you during a segment like this is to think about AAA for more than just roadside assistance. Did you know that when you switch and save to AAA for your auto insurance, you can save on average $529? That's a really cool thing, and the kind of thing I want to make sure you even know about. The AAA, not just the name to know for roadside assistance, but for auto insurance as well. For those that switch and save, boy, you're hearing a lot of good things about it. So it's AAA.com/auto insurance. That's the website. AAA.com/auto insurance for more on that. All right. Jeff, Arch Manning, you wrote about this at DawgNation.com, the 2023 quarterback. And here's the one thing I feel like I've been around the block enough to know. That once the 2023 recruiting class is the class, like once we're in that cycle, I think the Arch Manning recruitment is going to be as big a story as we've had in recruiting in a number of years because of the fact that Manning is such a famous name. He's the son of Cooper Manning. It makes him the nephew of Peyton and Eli, the grandson of Archie Manning. And there's just a lot of media awareness about the Manning family. Therefore, the Arch Manning recruitment will get tons of mainstream coverage in 2023 in a way that a typical five-star quarterback just can't get. So therefore, we know that the industry is going to be motivated to keep Manning's name near the top of the list, and they have good reason to do that. He's also a good player. But I guess what I'm trying to ask you about, though, with him on campus here this week, how good is Arch Manning as a player? Is this one of those things that it's interesting because of what his last name is, or is this a thing that's interesting because he truly is a unique prospect that's going to be worthy of all the attention he's kind of already starting to get, but the mountain of attention that he's about to get?
Yeah, I think, Brandon, let me look at two like waypoints here to discuss Arch Manning. First of all, I think it was maybe a month ago when a self-appointed worldwide leader in broadcasting, there was this talking head segment where they actually asked the question, is Arch Manning going to be better than Peyton Manning and Eli Manning? And that was a huge, hold on. I'm a recruiting guy, man, and I'm like, hold on, we got to pump the brakes on that. If I had a slipper or something or something to throw at the TV, I might have thrown it at the TV just then, man, because that's a little too extreme. On the other hand, he's as good enough, Brandon, to be a top 25, top 30 overall prospect. My personal feeling is they're not going to move him anywhere out of five-star status since it's such a name. It's a click generator. It's a magnet for attention. Currently there's 0 crystal balls predicted for Arch Manning. He's been to Clemson. He's going to Georgia. Georgia's actually got a better shot in terms of interest for Arch Manning than most might think. I think it will involve on throwing the ball around. But, Arch Manning is more of a charismatic, daredevil runner like his grandfather, Archie, than either of his uncles. He's a guy that, there's a lot more connections to Georgia than most might think. There's the Kirby Smart and Peyton Manning. Those guys do friendly jabs at each other all the time. Going back to their playing days, everybody remembers Peyton Manning giving Kirby a shout-out during the match play broadcast with Phil and Tiger because he couldn't wear red, otherwise Kirby Smart would turn it into a video ad for Georgia football on social media. But then there's Matt Luke. And you think of Matt Luke, you think of all that time at Ole Miss, around Archie, around Cooper, around Eli. Matt Luke was an assistant coach, a head coach, and he actually was a player at Ole Miss as well. So that's a guy right there that has a little bit more street cred than most when it comes to that. I said this in the forum, Brandon, that before the turn of events at South Carolina and Gunnar Stockton flipping to Georgia, I thought Georgia had a very good shot at Arch Manning because they had ideal separation potentially between Brock and then Arch Manning. And now, for Georgia to get in that race, there's LSU in there. They should be in there. He's out of Louisiana. Alabama's in there. Clemson's in there. Georgia's in there, Duke, Ole Miss, those schools. And really, except for like Duke and Ole Miss, all those schools are going to have the same situation where Arch Manning's going to go, okay, there's a veteran five-star there, there's a previous guy five-star there, and he's just going to come over there and work his way up the depth chart. I do have one prediction. I think fans will go crazy at any university should Arch Manning choose with any of those schools. And then you remember the gifs that was be like the gif that had the guy and his girlfriend walking down the street, and then you look back and he looks at the girl walking beside him, and we also saw those for all incarnations of Georgia football. Well, there need to be a new one because there would be Georgia fans and 2 quarterbacks by their side with Arch Manning walking by, and not just one.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, Jeff, where first of all, I'm not a scout, so I'm not going to pretend to be one, but on the basis of what I think I know about quarterbacks, I have no reason to believe right now that Manning is necessarily better than Brock Vandagriff or Gunnar Stockton. But as a Georgia fan, you sort of still want your team to be involved in an Arch Manning recruitment for the reasons that I pointed it to before. If his decision leads SportsCenter, then obviously you want your program mentioned in that discussion. Whether Arch Manning ends up being good after that or not, at least as good as the accolades would suggest, it's kind of a different thing. But when you have this like gigantic mainstream recruitment, the kind of thing that the New York Times may very well write about, then obviously you want your school to be mentioned in those circles. And it's not that I believe that Manning, would be better than Vandagriff or would be better than Stockton or would be better than anybody else. I mean, all of this is a little bit of a crapshoot, but clearly you just want that kind of, as they say in politics, earned media. You just want a little free media through all of this, and that's what being connected to the Manning family would probably get you.
Yeah, and you got it right. They're all the newsmakers attached to this, but Brandon, the other thing that makes this difference in parallels to other Georgia nervous quarterback recruiting room situation pressure cookers is basically Brock Vandagriff, Arch Manning, and Gunnar Stockton. They all have the same game. I think Arch is about 6'4". That's probably a little bit taller than even Brock Vandagriff and Gunnar Stockton. A couple of inches maybe taller than Gunnar Stockton. And then you wonder about, okay, who's played against the best competition, who's had the most experience. I think Arch Manning's teams are 18-3 in 2 seasons. He's thrown some interceptions. I mean, it's not like he's thrown, from a scouting perspective, he's completing 65% of his balls. I think he's thrown about 35 touchdowns against 15 interceptions in 2 seasons. He's got a 4-star receiver on his way to LSU, and A.J. Johnson as his go-to man, and Isidore Newman. And Newman is actually where both of his uncles went and played in New Orleans as well. And everybody knows, that's where Arch Manning settled as an NFL quarterback in New Orleans. So that's where the Mannings have always called home, at least where Archie and Olivia raised their boys. So, I think that's one of those things where, gosh, everybody's going to talk about it and everybody's going to think about it. I just don't know what Georgia fans would do if Georgia wound up signing Arch Manning in the class of 2023. I wonder if they'd be more nervous than excited about the recruiting machine for Georgia continuing to pay dividends and spit out another incredible signing.
So let me do this. I want to shift gears, and I want to finish by talking defensive line for a moment. I want you to go in depth on that. So if you want to, you can be pretty quick on this. We haven't spoken about Branson Robinson since he let it be known that he is going to make his commitment announcement in late July. This is obviously a big one. I've said on the show, Jeff, that Robinson, for me, I'll put him in a category with Malachi Starks and Jalen Walker, and those are 2 Georgia commits. Robinson, as of yet, is not. But I like these recruits as much as I've liked anybody in terms of the way they carry themselves as players on and off the field. Like, Robinson just comes across as like the salt of the earth type guy here. And obviously it's easy for Georgia fans to like him because he's been compared to Nick Chubb. He doesn't shy away from those comparisons. He's been very open about calling Georgia his leader. I mean, I don't see much reason right now to be anything other than like really excited for a Robinson announcement come late July. So just give me kind of the quick thumbnail on where you think things stand there now that we actually have a date on the board for when Robinson's going to make his pledge.
Yeah, so this is what we know about Robinson. Georgia's been the leader for quite some time. The schools that were kind of right there on the periphery were Alabama and Clemson. He never visited Clemson for their elite retreat on an unofficial visit. He did check out Alabama last week. Alabama was everything as expected. There's the narrative there that I'm sure Alabama will find some cosmetic tailoring to the obvious, but there's a narrative there that they have 2 running backs already committed and 2 pretty stinking good ones committed as well. And then where does that leave Branson Robinson? Well, there's the thing, Emmanuel Henderson, everybody remembers him. Emmanuel might even be a multi-positional type guy, might be actually a receiver, might be a defensive back, might be just spread out all over the formation. So Alabama's not classifying him per se as a running back on the board for the class, and that would seemingly enhance their chances with Robinson. I think the timing here really matters, where he takes the official visit to Alabama, and then I think it was a day afterward, he decided to make his decision date on July 22nd to honor his late uncle on his birthday. It was kind of always those three schools, LSU and Tennessee. He's at Tennessee this weekend. Those were the schools that were kind of on the periphery recruiting him. I don't know if he'll actually have time to visit LSU this month now. He was trying to get that official visit scheduled. But for Robinson, here's the evolution, is he went from, hey, if I feel it, I'm not going to waste anyone's time, to his father and Robinson, their family sat down and they were like, now listen, we're going to take these visits. Due diligence will happen. We will see all these schools. And even though he told me on that Georgia visit that he was checking up with his dad, and they were having the conferences at the end of the night going, all right, Dad, are we sure about this? Are we sure we're going to wait, right? We're going to wait, right? And the plan has still been implemented, and the plan is still being executed to wait. So that's what's going to happen. But then they also mentioned they wanted to come back for unofficial visits or game day visits. And now that is what has evolved, where that decision comes in late July. I think Georgia and a lot of schools are going to have elite events. Oscar Delp told us that he was planning to attend an elite event at Clemson in July. He told us that this week for next month, when there's a sliver of an open period for a quiet period for recruits and schools to meet up again. So I think it's interesting what's happened after the Alabama visit. If someone wanted to interpret and they wanted to go, well, he saw what he wanted to see at Alabama, now he sets his decision. I think those things are moving in the order that they should.
That's very, very interesting. I look forward to reading a lot more from you on that in the days to come. Let me finish with this, though. You know, we're kind of in a post-Bear Alexander world when it comes to Georgia and its defensive line recruitment, but things have been very busy. I mean, there's a very easy scenario that could unfold that would make Georgia fans, and I hate to say it this way, but it's just true, forget about Bear Alexander actually pretty quick. You know, your quote the other day from Jalen Walker talking about how hard he was pitching Travis Shaw when they were both at Georgia together. There's all kinds of online chatter out there about Walter Nolan right now. Kristen Miller was seen at Georgia over the course of the last few days. He shared some photographic evidence of that. I guess, Jeff, what I want to know from you is whether it be Shaw or Nolan, you know, you want to mention Miller and all this too, or really whoever else, like what's real, what's not, what really truly matters when it comes to Georgia and a bunch of big-name defensive linemen who have been coming through this campus the last few weeks.
Yeah, so, you know, Walter Nolan is on campus today. I guess I'm kind of like, trepidation is the word that I would use. I know everybody's really quick to put stories up and get clicks and everything else like that. I guess I just try to be measured with Walter Nolan's visit because, you know, candidly, for the longest time, I've always thought Georgia was in the mix, but not right in the middle of the Walter Nolan decision. You've heard a lot of things now about he's visited a lot of schools this week. I think he's visited Alabama, Tennessee, and now Georgia this week. This potentially might be the last visit that Walter Nolan takes until the next visit that Walter Nolan takes and schedules on the fly. Florida seemingly had a really good shot. I've always thought, Brandon, that Georgia was going to wind up 2 or 3 with Walter Nolan. That was when Big Bear Alexander was at the center of Georgia's defensive line plans. Now it's definitely Travis Shaw. I think Shaw is basically going to have to really see a whole lot that he likes from North Carolina this weekend, another official visit there. I think Georgia is right there with North Carolina for Travis Shaw. That's the guy that seemingly has all the King's horses and all the King's men around him. Georgia put its best foot forward last weekend on the official visit. There's Aaron Bryant, the guy out in Mississippi, who's told me he's told me ways that he couldn't go to Georgia because maybe he's not an ideal, you know, 4-man front fit. He's more of an odd fit. I mean, he's not an ideal odd front fit with a 3-man front. He's more of a 4-man front. He's not that type of gap shooter that maybe fits Georgia's base defense a lot better, but there's still a whole lot he likes about Georgia. He's seen Alabama, Texas, and Texas A&M. He's going to make a decision, I think, sometime in August. You hear things, you wonder about Tyree West, Brandon. That's a guy that's currently the defensive tackle committed in the class. And, you know, there are things out there, you know, Tyree West keeps visiting other schools. Is he, you know, he's not the ideal prototype size for Georgia for what they're looking for, especially what they're looking to replace off the roster with the 2022 recruiting class. So you got to wonder, where's Georgia defensive line recruiting? Is it Bryant? Is it? I don't think they're ever going to get back in the race with Big Bear Alexander now for obvious reasons. But you got to wonder, that once rosy, beautiful, crystalline, picturesque postcard defensive line recruiting class has evolved quite considerably. Mikael Williams, you've seen some of the camp footage come out from Mikael Williams about how he's looked. He seems very committed to USC. For the longest time, Brandon, I've always thought that Mikael Williams and Christian Miller want to play together. There's not just USC in the way with Georgia with Christian Miller. There's also Ohio State there. I think Georgia's still running about, third there for Christian Miller, even though he took another visit. He took another visit to Georgia this week, and for me, it kind of felt like that scene from Godfather 3 where Michael Corleone is like, just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in. That's kind of what this tug of war has been like with Christian Miller. It's like, you love me now, you don't love me now you love me again, what am I going to do? It's one of those things where I think, Brandon, Quayshawn Sapp, Tyree West, Mikael Williams, and Christian Miller, these are all great top 150 level prospects in the state of Georgia. They're all very connected. They all know each other for the longest time. And they hear things, man. They talk. They know, like, okay, Georgia's feeling you this way. Oh, no, Georgia's not lighting me up like that. And I think they begin to notice collectively, well, there's not a chance for all three of us to play together. And maybe everybody's going to have to find their own fit, which is what college football always does to these package deals every cycle. It certainly sounds like great headlines. It certainly sounds like I think we've probably reached the point, even with mainstream coverage of recruiting, where when a package deal actually happens, that's when it will be news. Not that the package deal is under consideration, because everybody's just trying to be buddy-buddy right now.
No, I think that's exactly right, Jeff. Great stuff. Thanks for being here on the road, assisted by AAA. Appreciate your time. Look forward to speaking to you again soon. Of course, in between now and then, you'll have a whole lot more coming on the pages of DawgNation.com. So thanks for being here on the road, assisted by AAA, and hope you have a great weekend.
Hey, man. Brandon, good weekend. Everybody out there, safe travels. And everybody remember AAA on your travels as well.
Sounds good.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, so a lot of ground there with Jeff. I'm glad we got a chance to cover. And I will tell you this. Jeff has spoken to Jalen Walker about Travis Shaw as of late. He's spoke to Coach Rand Tweed directly. We talked about that there before. It's really been, and I know most of you are reading all this as it is anyway, but go back and check his archive there at DawgNation.com. There's a bunch of big-time interviews that have popped up with him as of late. You can actually watch a lot of these on his show from Wednesday before the Hedge is presented by Kroger. And I'm not just kind of doing the job that someone like me is supposed to do, which is pointing to other content. I do truly mean this. I think that you'll get a better insight of what's going on with UGA recruiting right now if you check some of the stuff that Jeff Sentel has done as of late at DawgNation.com. I've got a very busy SEC through. We're going to do that here in a moment. Let me very quickly, though, remind you my friends at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Talk about getting on the road here this weekend. Really, it's an easy drive to Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, just a 2-hour drive from Atlanta, whether it's the original Harris Cherokee Casino Resort property or Harris Cherokee Valley River. You get the great casino gaming, you get the restaurants, you get the shopping, you get the entertainment options. Sports gaming is available. We got NBA playoffs going on. We got NHL playoffs going on. We got Major League Baseball. All of this is a precursor to the football season that's coming up, and you can get your action down on all of these games at the Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. So check out either of the two properties. Website to go to, Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee. That's Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee. That'll get you in touch with Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. So every now and then I get to be a newsman. I always think that when I grew up on TV, it always seemed like the anchors were like popping the papers on the desk. So I'll be a newsman here and say an update on a story we covered for you yesterday. So we've been talking a little bit about Caden Salter, the Tennessee quarterback signee who's kind of run afoul of the law now a couple of times. We said yesterday that the Vols have like 100 quarterbacks on the roster. This is not really a good time to continue to get in trouble given the fact they just have so many quarterbacks. Well, that prophecy has now come true. Caden Salter has been dismissed from the Tennessee roster. So we did talk yesterday about him getting arrested on a drug possession charge after he'd only been, within the last couple of weeks, reinstated on the active Tennessee roster after being suspended for an alleged altercation on campus a few months before that. So Salter is now gone from Knoxville. Speaking of Tennessee, yesterday, Phil Steele, the college football analyst who does the Phil Steele magazine, the preview magazine, was on the Paul Feinbaum show. And he said something about Tennessee that I thought was really interesting. I'm going to read this to you. I'm reading this from Saturday Down South, who got this from 24/7 Sports from the Paul Feinbaum show. It's a little bit of a blockchain here of how this quote gets in front of my eyes. But this is what Phil Steele says yesterday about Tennessee, which I think is interesting. He says, probably the team I'd be the most concerned about in the SEC would be Tennessee going through the coaching change. They lead the nation in one category, and that's players that have hit the portal. 25 have hit the portal this year. You've got new schemes on offense and defense and a new head coach. I think it's going to be tough for Tennessee to stay near the top, the middle of the pack, or the upper half. That's a very kind way of saying that Phil Steele, I believe, thinks the Vols may be awful. I think he may be right. And I just think the basement can't be low enough for this team right now that for all the embarrassment of having to move on from Jeremy Pruitt, after the embarrassment of having to move on from Butch Jones, after the embarrassment of having to move on from Derek Dooley, that Tennessee as a program may not have hit rock bottom yet, that this team this year, for all the reasons that Phil Steele just mentioned and others, they may be truly terrible. And when you think about a Kentucky team that's not that bad this year, when you think about a Missouri team that's not that bad this year, when you think about, Georgia and Florida still being, where they are, certainly ahead of Tennessee in the pecking order, they better hope they beat Vanderbilt, because otherwise they're just not going to be a whole lot of wins to come for the Vols this year. And, for a guy like Josh Heupel, he just may find himself in a tough situation of even trying to establish a program. Sometimes the smart people in college football call that first year, instead of a year one, they call it a year zero, because you're essentially at ground zero. But I don't know that Josh Heupel is even at that. I mean, I think that he's in a real mess there in Knoxville, and it was interesting to hear Phil Steele say that yesterday on the Paul Feinbaum show. A couple stories here involving the Florida Gators. First, Jamarian Burt, who you may remember was kind of on Georgia's radar for a moment, earned an offer from Georgia, took a visit to UGA. There had been a little bit of scuttlebutt and chatter related to him, and now Jamarian Burt has actually moved on to the Florida Gators. He's committed to Florida. I think there was some, debate and discussion about how committable the offer that he had was to UGA, just to be frank and honest here for a moment. But he has committed to Florida. There's been a little bit of criticism from Florida fans about this, but Burt, a name that at one point in time was on Georgia's radar, now a commitment to Florida, Florida leaping in to take that commitment pretty quickly. And then there's this on the Florida front. And so there was kind of this weird thing that happened on social media yesterday, where Brenton Cox put this tweet up. And let me show this to you on the screen here for a moment. So here's the tweet from Cox that says, the best pass rusher in college football 2022, and it's got a picture of, obviously, Brenton Cox there. And there are like two different life cycles of this tweet. On the one hand, and some folks shared this with me, it's like, who does Brenton Cox think he is, calling himself the best pass rusher in college football? But then there's this other thing that started emerging of, wait a second, what's he talking about for 2022? So it went from some Georgia fans thinking that Brenton Cox was exaggerating his skills as a pass rusher to other people saying, if he's saying he's going to be the best pass rusher in 2022, does that mean that he's injured? And then I guess the latest development in all of this is, because otherwise, why wouldn't he just say 2021? If he's saying 2022, does that mean he's on the shelf for this upcoming season? And I guess the latest life cycle of all of this is, I believe that Brenton Cox has now deleted that tweet. So who knows where any of this stands. It was a little bit of an odd social media message. It kind of generated reactions on a number of fronts about what Brenton Cox meant. Maybe it was just kind of a typo, because at least when I checked his timeline this morning, I did not see that tweet anymore. So kind of an odd thing there, but it had folks talking around the SEC a bit yesterday, and we will make that your SEC through. Speaking of social media stuff that gets folks talking, we do our Gator Hater roll call at the end of the show. We also like to give out a Golden Shoe Award. Now, sometimes the Golden Shoe is for folks who are showing some good Gator hating credentials, and sometimes it's just for whatever, including occasionally that UGA fan who's just really good at sifting through social media and spotting cool things we might want to see. An example of that today, let me show you this tweet on the screen. This comes from Ully. He's at RovUlly on Twitter. He says, at DawgNation Daily, hey, BA, is that who I think this is in the background? It's a picture of Kirby Smart with the recruit. There is a player running there in the background, football tucked underneath his shoulder. And when you zoom in on that closely, yes, that does appear to be, at least to the best of my knowledge, the first sighting of Eric Gilbert, recent Georgia transfer, wearing the Georgia red and black there, looking very good in that Georgia colors. Good job by Ully spotting that. Will make you the Golden Shoe winner for today. And Gator Hater Countdown, 127 days from right now, Georgia gets some revenge against Florida. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews can be the one you trust to get that air conditioning unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs. You can find them online at rsandrews.com. They will take care of you. They'll get you nice and cool and comfortable for the summer that's still on its way. And there's hot weather to come. Y'all know that. So trust R.S. Andrews for all of that here today. All right, I am going to start on YouTube today. We're going to take a few comments. We're not going to go super long because we do have a little bit of a busy day today. We're not going to go super long, but we will have some fun here. And hope all of you are enjoying yourself here on a Friday there as well. Tavares Cash, like seeing Eric Gilbert there. I'm glad, Tavares, you enjoy that. Brady Pest Manager says Brenton Cox had surgery. Looks like he's out for 2021. Do we know that for sure? So, I mean, there had been some chatter, but I tried to find some confirmation that day. I wasn't able to find that. So, I'm not quite sure what that is. So, yes, I mean, if he is truly out, then that's certainly something, that I'm certainly sorry for him to be able to hear on that, because you hate to see anybody get hurt. Even guys, that are playing in Florida. We love the rivalry. We love everything that goes with that, but we certainly wouldn't wish injury on anybody. All right, so let's see what else is going on. DogFan3 says he's got Tennessee beating Florida this year. That's the kind of hot take, really, really strong opinion, bold claim that I love to have in the comments section. That is really good stuff. Really good stuff. Jay Shipes predicted that would go 5 in a row starting on Facebook. Jay, how wrong you are on that. John Quick on the subject of Carson Beck saying he's got to show us something. He's got big Brock Vandegrift waiting in the wings, and I do think that's an interesting competition, right? And, on the one hand, if you want to go on just the basis of recruiting rankings, obviously in that particular case, it's Brock Vandegrift who would seem to have the advantage. Or if you want to go on the basis of who has the experience, Carson Beck, having been on this campus for a year ago, learning the Todd Monken offense, it seems like that would give him the advantage. So different guys have different things seemingly at their disposal in this competition, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And, I've said before, at the beginning of the season, I think that Georgia may be glad it has someone like Stetson Bennett, who has experience starting in SEC play. If something were to happen with JT Daniels, it would briefly take him off the field for whatever reason. It's nice to have a guy who's played before like Bennett to kind of step into that fold. But over the course of the season, I think a lot of Georgia fans are hopeful, whether it's a Carson Beck or a Brock Vandegrift, that they not only emerge as the number 2 quarterback, but emerge as someone who would have potentially the inside's track on being next year's starter as well. So I think that's all really true. Let's see what else. Thomas Van Santa giving you a go dog sick'em. I love to see that. John Quick also mentioning Stetson Bennett there as well. Let me see what else is in the comment section right now. Thomas Gwynn checking in. Good to see you, Thomas. William Perry enjoyed hearing Renny Curran's speech. Yeah, it was great. Really strong stuff. And that kind of thing, I'm just sort of sentimental by nature. And now that I'm a dad, I think I'm even more sentimental than I've ever been before. It's just kind of weird how you like when I was younger, I didn't like country music at all, really. And as I get older, I thought country music was, for the most part, a little too sentimental. But now, as I get older, now I'm somewhat sentimental and kind of into a lot more of that kind of stuff. And now I like country music a lot more than I used to for that very reason. And so when someone like Renny Curran is giving you a very passionate speech, articulating all the ways in which being at Georgia mattered to him and all the things that's meant for his life and what he predicts that can mean for the lives of these recruits, yeah, that kind of stuff really works on me. It really does. DogFan3 asking about Brandon Turnage. Yeah, that's one of those that's just kind of quiet right now. And I think you've got to give that some time to play out. And this is one of those things where Georgia's going to use its prerogative not to make any kind of announcement one way or another, right? I mean, Georgia doesn't, I guess in the case of, some transfers, it's giving you as close to an official announcement as they're going to give you. They've shown their names on the roster. But in terms of Brandon Turnage, I guess you'll have SEC Media Days. That's the one good thing is Smart will speak at SEC Media Days the middle of next month. And so if you're curious about where things stand with Turnage, you won't have to wait much longer than the middle of July on that because that's when Smart will speak. And he'll either say, no, he went home and stayed, or he actually changed his mind, decided to come back, or we made room to allow him to come back, or whatever the words are. It's certainly kind of an unknown scenario right now, at least not fully known, but Smart will be ready to speak on that next month, and so you'll get some more details on that then. Stephen Wainwright says that Jeff and I have the best job ever. Yeah, I certainly appreciate that. I don't take that for granted, not any single day. Thomas Van Zandt predicting some good things for Brock Vandegrift could very well be true. Could very well see that happening. Let us see what else. Over here on the Facebook side of things for a moment. Bryce Dixon says he thinks it's BS that SEC Media Days didn't take place last season. Yeah, that was, I guess, the first, kind of sign of just how weird that year was going to be. We didn't have an SEC Media Days. We are going to have that this year. This is kind of an inside thing. We talked about this briefly yesterday. It's kind of an inside media thing a little bit, but it's still kind of to be determined just how normal the SEC Media Days is. In recent years, kind of pre-pandemic, the SEC as a league was content to allow SEC Media Days to be as big as possible. There were very few restrictions on credentials. It is a media event, and the SEC was content to keep allowing more and more credentialed media to come, whereas like in a press box for a game, you are limited by space. In the big convention halls where this kind of thing takes place, you're not quite as limited by space, and so therefore the SEC did not do too much to limit this. They would keep making Radio Row bigger each and every year. They would keep making the media allowed in for the press conferences and things like that bigger each and every year. More and more fans were starting to come. So we don't quite know yet for this year is just how back to normal it all is. It seems like there's going to be some sort of cap on credentialing. I don't think we quite yet know if fans are going to be allowed in the lobby of the Winfrey Hotel. There may be very little way to keep them out. I don't know about that one way or another, but it is back, and I think we're kind of waiting to see just how big it truly ends up being. Brandon Griffin says he feels a special connection with me, same first name and all. Well, I appreciate that, Brandon. I feel that connection with you. Matt Rukavina checking in. Matt Rukavina says it may be June, but Tennessee's still saying I'll be home for Christmas. And, yeah, I think this year that's probably the very likely outcome for the end of that season. Very funny stuff. Very funny stuff. Tom Valley checking in. Good to see you, Tom. Hugh Nash says this summer's going to be huge for solidifying our offensive line. Yeah, the chemistry those guys have together and just really determining who those five starters are going to be. We had a pretty interesting discussion on this last night on Cover 4 Live, and I hope you got a chance to see that. Mike Griffith made an interesting point that he doesn't know that he buys into the phrase that gets thrown around sometimes, and the Georgia coaches are usually pretty careful to say it this way. We have to identify our best five. We have to identify our best five. And what Mike said was, I thought this was kind of an interesting point, that, he's not quite so sure that's the best way to look at it, as opposed to, hey, just find the five best guys. How about the best guy to play the individual positions, maybe left tackle in particular? And I understand where Mike's coming from on that. And I guess I also kind of understand where the Georgia coaches come from on that as well, that they do cross-train these guys a lot. They do seek that versatility from offensive linemen, and really some of the best Georgia offensive linemen and best Georgia offensive line prospects are guys who seemingly could play multiple positions. And so it's one of the reasons why, although I respect what Hugh and others are saying, that, hey, this is a very important issue for this team, I certainly believe that to be true. One of the reasons I don't expect it to hold Georgia back for what it's capable of doing this season is because of the versatility of these offensive linemen, Jamari Salyer in particular, who could be a guard, could be a tackle, that it's either a scenario where someone like Xavier Truss or Broderick Jones, maybe an Amarius Mims, emerges ahead of Jamari Salyer, and if they can't surpass his level of play, then it's Salyer who's your starter at left tackle, and he showed last year he can certainly play that at a competent level. So it is the versatility and the ability of multiple guys to play multiple positions, and a number of guys who you truly feel have capabilities of playing at a high level. I guess I'm not quite as concerned with the offensive line situation as maybe some other people are, but I understand why others are. Brandon Griffin says if the offensive line holds its own, will be unstoppable this year. And yeah, that is that that key that you believe could truly, fully unlock all the offensive capabilities. For as good as JT Daniels could be, and as good as this deep stable of running backs could be, and all of these offensive weapons, receiver and tight end who are on the verge of breakout seasons, the thing that could really bring all of that to the, just the full, to its full potential is the offensive line being as good as it possibly can be. No doubt about that. Randy Hall asking if DawgNation will be at Branson Robinson's announcement. I guess it's probably still a little too early for me to know that, although Jeff Sentel may know more of the details on that. Keith Old says, when is DawgNation going to give us a video tour of the new football facilities? So on this show a few weeks ago, Keith, we did show some of the video that was out there that some of the recruits had shared. We did a thing on the show about that. In fact, who was... It was somebody that Jeff had on his show. Who was that had shared that? I'm blanking on who that was now. But why am I can't remember that. But we did show some video of this from a couple of weeks ago. It was actually a pretty good video. Jermaine King, I talked about being a newsman earlier. He says I need more of like a Ron Burgundy style news anchor and say, you stay classy, DawgNation. And thanks for stopping by. I love Anchorman. I love that movie. I loved Anchorman. It's one of those things where like you see it the first time and it's kind of okay, but then like you rewatch it 2,000 times. When it first came out in the early 2000s, I watched it a million times. I just love everything about that. Everything about that. Matt Rukavine also gives you a Paul Harvey style. Now you know the rest of the story. And I liked Paul Harvey a lot too. My dad loved Paul Harvey. My grandfather, too. Randy Hall says, any new additions to your desk? So, as it stands right now, the desk looks the way it does. I think we have kind of a studio upgrade coming here at some point in time. So, things may look a little different after we do that. I have a few ideas in mind for kind of how it might evolve. So, stay tuned for that. Brandon Griffin also mentioned the Anchorman bloopers. Yeah. In kind of the DVD era, people don't have DVDs anymore, but some of those Anchorman kind of outtake things they showed on the old DVD, some of that kind of stuff was very, very funny. Very funny. I mean, Phil, what's his name? Will Ferrell is just a funny guy. Just a very funny guy. Joe Moody reminding us that part of Anchorman 2 was filmed on East Beach at St. Simon's Island. That's a very good point. Very good point. Randy Hall says, when I add the sound effects, the Ric Flair woo. Yeah, that's a great one to have for the soundboard for sure. For sure. And a great job bringing that back top of mind again, too, Randy, if I must say. Yeet a cookie checking in. We're going to get ready to sign off after this. He says, that's how it was with Super Troopers. He says, the first time I walked in was like, I get it. And then I thought it was stupid, he says. So, yeah, certain movies kind of hit you different the more you kind of rewatch them. The scene where with all the news teams are fighting with each other, some of that stuff is just really, really funny to me. Scott Harris also kind of remembering some of the very funny lines from Anchorman. Yeah, there's a lot of funny stuff in there for sure. John Hendricks brings this up, and I'd heard this. I wasn't sure if everybody got to do this or not because I've been out of town a little bit, so I haven't been able to do the Topgolf thing. But he says he was able to check out the recruiting lounge and the locker rooms at the stadium last Saturday after playing some Topgolf. Is that part of the experience? Because I've heard a couple people say that, but not everyone has said that. So, John, if you did do that, that's really pretty impressive stuff. I'd heard that was kind of part of the experience a little bit. Pretty good. Rashad Bourne predicting that Missouri will be a sleeper team this season, getting 8 or 9 wins. If that is true, it makes it harder on some of these SEC East teams with first-year coaches. Shane Beamer, South Carolina, Josh Heupel at Tennessee. And like the other thing about Missouri as of late is like they're doing really well in recruiting. They've got a number of 4-star commitments right now that Eli Drinkwitz is actually kind of finding his footing there in Columbia just a little bit. Frederick Gleaton says he still tries to watch Animal House at least once per year. Yeah, that's a good one too. Jay Shipes, I'm not quite sure I can read that, but pretty funny. Frank Patterson says, which 3 Georgia players do I think go to media day? That's a good question. I'll say I believe it's Jamari Salyer. I believe it may be JT Daniels. Kirby Smart typically is not one to really take a quarterback to media days. He tries to avoid that kind of thing, too much hype around quarterbacks, things like that. But Daniels is such a good spokesman for the program. It's so obvious that he is the starting quarterback. There's no controversy there. That he actually may take JT Daniels this year. A lot of times, and this is kind of the inside politics, inside baseball type stuff that media people notice. A lot of times for Georgia, if it's 3 players, it's usually 2 defensive players, 1 guy on offense. It may be 2 offensive players this year. It may be Salyer. It may be JT Daniels. And then the defensive guy, is it Jordan Davis? Because that'd be a good one to take. I'm trying to think if there's another obvious name that it could be. Maybe Nakobe Dean there. I think I'll go Daniels, Salyer, Jordan Davis. Because there's kind of a combination of good player who's also, in the eyes of the coach, is a good spokesman for the program. I think those may be the 3 right there. Some of you may say I'm leaving off an obvious one. Maybe Kyrus Jackson could be that. Maybe you sub out Kyrus, sub out Salyer, put Kyrus in, maybe. Although I think I'm going to stick with my original trio of Daniels, Salyer, Jordan Davis. That's my prediction. Does that sound about right? Y'all tell me what you think about that. All right, we're going to get ready to go. Very quickly stuff. Jermaine King on the subject of Will Ferrell, some of the verbal pauses. Just a funny guy. Just a very funny guy. Really entertaining stuff. Scott Harris is ready to see the light up Sanford Stadium again. All those cell phones holding up those lights. That's always a great thing to see. Frederick Gleaton mentions Zamir White as a possibility. Maybe so, but I sort of feel like they'll go offense more like Salyer. Because you remember, Zamir's a pretty shy guy all the way around. He doesn't really like talking to the media. So that's the kind of thing I think he would prefer not to do, and I think that Georgia would probably give him his wish on that. DogFan3 mentions Nakobe Dean. I do think Nakobe's a possibility. Baggins and Friends gives you the same 3 I gave you, Daniels, Davis, Salyer. Bank 6 says the defensive guy has to be Nakobe Dean. It might be. It very well might be. David Gross says Dan Mullen's going to bring Ronald McDonald. That's very funny. I guess if Jeremy Pruitt was still there, he may be bringing Ronald McDonald for obvious reasons. Stephen Wainwright says George Pickens. Because Pickens is injured, and once again, Pickens is one of those guys that doesn't seem like talk to the media very much. He just hasn't done that very much. That he might prefer not to do that. Seems like he kind of tries to avoid that as much as possible. So that's one of the reasons they may not do that. As I said before, it's more than just who's a good player. It's kind of who's a good player and who also has a lot of experience talking to the media. Certain Georgia players just have more of that than others do. So interesting to think, and pretty soon we'll find out all about that. All right, thanks for being here. I hope you'll check out the AJC online. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. Obviously, the big story to follow right now, the incredible coverage of the Eastern Conference Finals. Hawks get a Game 1 win, now looking to steal another one up there in Milwaukee. Just such a fun team to watch, and such an amazing playoff run that shows no signs of slowing down right now. So, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, online, AJC.com, all the coverage from Milwaukee. You can find that there as the Hawks try to beat up on the Bucks once again. So read that. We'll see you back here Monday for DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Also, another big thanks to R.S. Andrews for making the R.S. Andrews Cool Down possible. Our chance to interact, made possible by our friends at R.S. Andrews. Find them online, rsandrews.com. They will get your air conditioning tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Trust them to do that. Trust me to see you back here again on Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody.